Hey everybody, this is Praxis. In this video I want to share with you something that's allowed me to turn homemade bread into something that people in my family actually want to consume in the form of really nice slices of bread. I've been making homemade bread for a while. I use my own homemade starter and I cook it whenever possible in this little oven right above the wood stove. Thing works really great for making a nice crust on the bread. But one thing that I'd always have trouble with is slicing it into some kind of a slice that is actually functional. Now, it was fine for me. I could cut off a slab and put something on there. But in terms of making a sandwich, I had a lot of trouble cutting thin slices. So my sandwiches would end up being like that thick and super crusty. So I'd be like, trying to fit in my mouth, and it just wasn't happening at all for my boy. So a lot of times we were still buying, in fact, every single week, whenever we went out, we were still buying store-bought bread sliced from the grocery store, and that adds up over time. Like the types of breads that we were buying, it was always like at least $6 or $7 per loaf of bread, so it was an awful lot of money, and it felt like I was throwing a lot of money away when I knew that I could make really good, really tasty bread at home, and the only thing that was holding me back from making it so that people could utilize the bread is the ability to slice it really thin. So that's what we're going to talk about in this video, is the device that I found to do that. Now there are multiple different ways of achieving that slice. One is just, I don't know, like man up and figure out how to do the cutting yourself. I've been practicing for that I've been practicing on that for a while, and I've never really improved very much. I've been given tips from people that using a electric knife that kind of self-oscillates can help to kind of get you through the bread without crushing it, and you can make thinner slices. There were little boards that have kind of these little spacers in them, and you can kind of do a knife through that. I've tried many different methods, and this one is kind of my favorite. I got this recently. This is it's a bread slicer. It's also for like sausage and things like that. It's made by a company called Zassenhaus. Allegedly it's German made, and allegedly things that are made by Germans are well engineered, but this thing did come with a incredibly major problem, and I'm going to talk about that in this video. Now I solved it by with my own like Irish American engineering, and what this thing was missing, well, first off, let's tell you how the thing works. You've got this little knob here, and this allows you to set the thickness of your bread slice, and what you do is just take a piece of bread, put it on this side, and turn this crank, and while you're turning the crank, you run the bread through and it will slice a piece off, and that worked out pretty well. But a huge problem came up while I was using this, and I guess, you know, as great as the Germans might be in designing things, one part of the design process that apparently the people forgot to implement when they were designing this was to test it once. Anyone who would ever test this would realize very quickly that as the bread comes off, it starts kind of folding away as you're cutting it, and you got the crank right here, and the crank is banging into the piece of bread, and you have to kind of take your thumb and kind of hold the bread up while you do a rotation, and then maybe your pinky finger comes into play there. It was really awkward and super unnecessarily awkward, because you might be wondering, well, how would the bread flop over because there's this little metal guide right here. Well, that doesn't come with it. That was something that I just added yesterday. My dad's got a machine shop, and I went over there, and we just took a little piece of metal here. It's a piece of stainless steel. It didn't have to be stainless steel. It was actually kind of a pain in the butt to work with it, because stainless steel is a little harder than aluminum. But we happened to have this little piece of scrap, bent it into this shape, made a couple of holes, tapped some holes into here, and screwed it on. And now it's perfectly good as a guide, because now you can put bread through, and it stays tucked up in there, and you can just take it out. So now it works really well. Again, if the Germans had just tested their device once, they would have realized, I was going to try a German accent, I'm not going to try it. They would have realized, oh, this thing doesn't work very well, we need to just add a simple little finger to hold the bread up. It doesn't have to be this crazy if you were to buy this device, which I would highly recommend, just because it saves me a ton of money. Now, I'm going to get to the cost of this device in a bit, because it is a bit of an investment, but if you think about it in terms of how many loaves of bread that you'll never have to buy anymore, it pays for itself relatively quickly. Now, if you were going to get this and you don't happen to have a dad that has a machine shop, or you don't have a machine shop yourself, this finger here, it doesn't really need to be super rigid. You could take kind of anything, like a couple of chopsticks or something like that, offset them a little bit, and you could literally like just silicone glue them on here. It's not like the bread is putting an enormous amount of force on this. It could be anything. I mean, honest to God, like a piece of cardboard that was kind of bent properly with a little bit of paperwork around it to make it a little bit rigid. You know, that would be totally fine. I did this, and I even check that detail work out there. Even match the contour of the side there. You know, so it doesn't have to be anything this severe, but I did a lot of shopping around, and I did a lot of investigating about different ways of slicing bread in a way where you're going to get those nice thin slices. I looked at like big electric machines, and you know, those are even more expensive than this device. You know, the downside of that was, you know, it was more money. It was also, you know, it takes up a lot of space. You know, you only have so much space in your house and certainly in your kitchen, and you know, you don't want to have big stuff. I like this, that it's pretty small, it just stores in the cupboard. The big electric slicers, you know, they take up a lot of room. They're pretty expensive, and every single time I would contact a company that was selling one of those big electric slicers, I would say, you know, I'm not slicing up Wonder Bread. I'm slicing up, you know, a nice homemade loaf that has kind of a crust on the surface. Can your machine go through a crusty bread? And unanimously, all the people who make these kind of electric slicers, at least all the ones that I got in touch with, all said no. Our stuff is just for, like, you know, soft, you know, fluffy Wonder Breads without any kind of a crust at all. The devices must exist to slice crusty bread, but I certainly couldn't find any of them marketed towards the public. Maybe you got to go to like some kind of a specialty, like bakery supply store or something like that. I wasn't able to find them, and for the price points that I was seeing, like $500 for these machines that can only slice white bread, I can't imagine what the ones that can cut through crusty bread were going to cost people. As for those oscillating electric knives, which were another option, you know, those are not very expensive, but I really felt like the consistency of this was going to be a lot better, and I really like how I'm not I'm not crushing the bread as I'm going through it, because that was always my big problem in the past. I'd be kind of crushing the bread whenever I tried to slice. So this works really well. So how much does this cost? Well, I can't say exactly what it costs today, because prices are always going up and down and up and down. No, I'm just kidding. They're always going up. When I bought this, it was just about $200, and that's a lot of money to spend to cut bread. But here's the way that I look at it: is every single loaf of bread that I make, and I would make one per week, it's saving me about $6 or $7, because the raw ingredients to make the bread are, you know, they're so inexpensive that they might as well be free. I buy big bulk bags of flour. It costs maybe, I don't even know. It's not very much for the raw ingredients to make bread. It's just the flour, and it's the water, and it's the salt. I have my own yeast starter, so I don't have to pay for yeast or anything like that. In terms of energy, I've got a wood stove running right here, and I'm using it to heat the house anyway, so it's zero energy to make the bread. So the loaves of bread are essentially zero, and that saves me about $6 or $7 per week. So over a year, that's $6 or $7 times 50 weeks per year. You can see that it adds up pretty quickly, where a device like this, I'm still kind of paying it off because I've only owned it for a few months, but in very short order, I'm going to be, penny saved, penny earned, and earning an awful lot of money by being able to slice my own bread. And again, you can make bread and you can do your own cuts with just a regular knife, and I did that for a long time. But if your bread is not being utilized because the pieces are too thick, and you got kids in your family and their mouths only open up like this, they can't open up like that to get around like a really thick piece of crusty bread that you're making. If the reality is that you're ending up buying store-bought bread because the homemade stuff, you just can't get it thin enough, something like this might be good for you. But again, this one made by Zassenhaus, it works really well. The engineering on it feels really firm, but they have that major issue. You have to do something about this, whether it's something really slick and beautiful looking, like what me and my dad did the other day here, or if it's just a couple of chopsticks or a piece of cardboard, or a clothes hanger or something like that. Again, you could just silicone glue it on. You don't need like a ton of, you really don't need screws going through. That's definitely overkill. But you definitely would need something, because it is just really infuriating that you're running it through and you're trying to get your finger over there to kind of hold up the bread, and you're trying to finish up the cut here, and the blade's slowing down because you're trying to fumble on the other side, so you would kind of make sloppy cuts on the back sides of the bread. So it definitely needs to be finished being made, but I would highly recommend it. And this thing is going to save me hundreds and hundreds of dollars over the next couple decades of my life, because I'm able to get loaves of bread that I would normally have paid nearly $10 for, and in the future maybe more than $10, and I'm able to get them essentially practically for free. That's it. Hope you find this helpful, and thanks for watching. Please subscribe for new videos all the time, and if you'd like to support this channel, you can do so either through Patreon or PayPal.